Welcome to the Widowed Mom Podcast, episode 326, Can Widows Change Their Happiness Set Point?
Welcome to the Widowed Mom Podcast, the only podcast that offers a proven process to help you work through your grief, to grow, evolve, and create a future you can truly look forward to. Here's your host, Master Certified Life Coach, Grief Expert, Widow, and Mom, Krista St-Germain.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of the podcast. Woo! Here I am in the new house. Finally. I've been thinking, I got to get an episode recorded. I am mostly unpacked. There are a few boxes left, but I'm mostly unpacked. I'm settling in nicely. The 2 TVs upstairs were installed. That was a nice bit of progress to be made. Art has been put on the walls and it's starting to feel like a home to me. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see my new background. It's a little sparse. Could probably use a lamp or some flowers or something, but I'm getting there. So thank you to all of you who have been cheering me on and sending me kind emails and just rooting for me these last few months. It's kind of been a wild ride. And so I just really appreciate all the support. And I'm glad to be back with you in my new environment, recording an episode, which is very appropriate on Happiness Set Point. And I'm not sure I've ever explicitly talked about Happiness Set Point today. So today I want to talk about what it is, what it means for you, and how you can actually change it. Because I think if you're anything like most of the widows that I work with, you don't want the average happiness set point. You don't want to settle for what you are used to or were used to before your person died. You want to live life fully. You want to maximize. You want to experience amazing things and not just womp womp what you're used to. So, okay, let's talk about the happiness set point. So the idea of a happiness set point comes from something called hedonic adaptation. Maybe you've heard of it. Maybe you haven't. Doesn't really matter. But simply put, back in the 70s, some psychologists described what they called the hedonic treadmill. And the hedonic treadmill is essentially our tendency to adapt both to the things we like, the positive things, and to the things we don't like, the negative changes. So things happen in our lives, and while we may experience one as negative or one as positive, eventually we adapt. Then later in the late 70s, the same psychologists, Philip Brickman and Donald Campbell, studied 2 very different groups of people. They studied recent lottery winners, and they studied people who had become paraplegic after accidents. And what they found was that within only a year or 2 after what had happened to them, both groups actually returned to roughly the same level of happiness that they had had before they either won the lottery or became paraplegic. Kind of surprising, right? So the takeaway at the time was that happiness is kind of like a thermostat. You can crank it up, you can crank it down temporarily, but eventually it will go back to its preset temperature, aka your happiness set point. So it's like if you buy a new car, right? At first, you're very excited about the new car and you tell everyone about it and you love the smell and you find excuses to drive it and you just think it's amazing. And then after a while, maybe a few months later, it just feels like your car. You like it still, but it's normal now. Or maybe when something hard happens, like losing your job, perhaps losing your spouse, right? At first, it might be only negative. All you can see is the fear and the stress. And then after a while, you start kind of figuring some things out. Maybe in the case of a job, you start to find some things that you like about it. You start to find a routine. Maybe even as a widow, you start to find some things that you still like about your life. In both cases, your feelings kind of slide back toward what was your normal, kind of like a balloon that floats up or it floats down for a bit, but then it eventually drifts back to where it started. That's hedonic adaptation. So it's your emotional, normal kind of pulling you back to where you're used to being. And for widows who want to create a future that they can get excited about, right? Who genuinely want to love life again, that can feel like mixed news maybe. So if your set point feels permanently lowered after loss, the idea that you can only get back to where you were, but not any higher, might sound a little bit discouraging. On the other hand, it might sound a little bit encouraging to hear that, oh, okay, this is awful now, but humans usually adjust. All right, so that's hedonic adaptation. Okay, but that was in the 70s, right? And things change. So science has evolved. And here's some hopeful information for you. A couple of things that I am excited to tell you. So in the 2000s, In fact, specifically as it relates to this particular body of work. So in 2005, I will butcher their last names, so I apologize if these folks happen to come across my butchering of their names. But Sonia Lubomyrsky, Kenan Sheldon, and David Shadcade. I'm totally not pronouncing it correctly. Forgive me. Anyway, in the review of general psychology, what they did is they broke down happiness into 3 pieces. And what they said was that about 50% of happiness was genetic, meaning your temperament, your inherited traits, and they studied twins basically to come up with this. But about 50% of your happiness is genetic, according to their work. About 10% is the circumstances of your life. So things like relationship status and health and income circumstances. Now, again, those of you who have coached with me, you're probably like, wait, what? Circumstances? No. So we could have another discussion about that, but this is their work, okay? So 50% of happiness being genetic, 10% being life circumstances, and then there's still 40% left, right? 40% being intentional activity, meaning your thoughts, your habits, your behaviors. So what their work is telling us is, I think, very good news, which is that 40% of our happiness, according to their work, is changeable. That's the lever that we can pull to raise the baseline of that happiness set point. 40%. That's a pretty big deal, right? And when you hear me talk about neuroplasticity, that's where this comes in, right? The brain's ability to rewire itself through repeated experience, which I'm sure you have heard me talk about. You might also know that you might have heard of Hebb's law. Donald Hebb, he described the principle way back in 1949. He said, cells that fire together wire together, or neurons that fire together wire together. So modern research definitely confirms this, meaning that we can change our brain. We can rewire our brain into a lower set point through repeated patterns of negative thinking, and we can rewire our brain into a higher set point through intentional practice. Good news, right? 40% of our happiness. And I know you have heard me talk a million times about post-traumatic growth. You can go listen to other episodes I've done on specifically post-traumatic growth, but I'm always kind of weaving it in, right? So post-traumatic growth, Tedeschi and Calhoun's work in the mid-90s showed that after trauma, some people actually experience higher levels of life satisfaction than before the trauma. Not because they wanted the trauma, not because they were happy that it happened, not because they were grateful for it, not because they believed it was a part of God's plan, but because their perspective changed. They changed their perspective. So they developed, and you can develop, a deeper appreciation for life, stronger relationships, a deeper spiritual life, clearer sense of purpose. In other words, we go through things and we get to decide who we want to be after we go through those things. We get to decide who we want to be. We get to decide what meaning we want to make when we go through those things. And in doing so intentionally, our average level of well-being over time can be higher than it was before the loss, before the thing we didn't want. We don't ever have to be grateful that it happened. We don't ever have to even believe that it should have happened. But we always get to decide who we want to be in it. Now, not everyone does this, obviously, right? Why is that? Why do some people stay stuck? Why do some people keep that set point lower than they would like it to be? First of all, it's not because there's anything wrong with them. It's not because they aren't capable of doing it. It's in large part because the human brain is just efficient. It likes being efficient. It was programmed to be efficient for our survival. So it will keep repeating our most practiced thoughts over and over and over, even if they make us miserable, right? So my best days are behind me. I'll never be as happy as I once was. Those thoughts don't feel good, but if they become well practiced, then brains love habits, brains love efficiency, and that will be the way that your brain thinks about your life and what's possible for you. So it's not because you're broken or flawed, it's because brains love efficiency. And also probably because you might not even know that it's possible for you. You might not know that your brain is highly plastic and that these changes are possible. You might not know about post-traumatic growth or the 40% that is changeable through habit and through intention. You might also just not want to do the work, right? You might be stuck in some avoidance behaviors. You might be numbing out. You might have some ideas about what it means to actually be happy again. And maybe that feels like a betrayal to them. And so for those folks, their brain never gets the chance to rewire in that way that up-levels the happiness set point. So for some people, they don't take advantage of that possibility that exists. Not because there's anything wrong with them, but most likely because they just don't know about it or they aren't using what they know. But I don't want that to be you. I want you to take advantage of it. If you want to be more in love with your life than you've ever been, that's possible. That's possible. So how do we start to shift the happiness set point? How do we raise that baseline? A few things that I will offer you today. And I will say that this is literally the work I do with my clients. Okay, so, and then Mom Goes On, it's a 6-month program and it's not a 15-minute podcast episode, but I want to give you some things to start with. So number one is just becoming aware, right? Starting to notice what thoughts you are rehearsing most. Are they helping you move toward the life that you want, or are they moving you away from the life that you want? Are they keeping you anchored in the past? So start to notice, become aware. Number two, I want you to consider savoring the little things, the micro joys, the teeny tiny, don't even matter kinds of things that you'd ordinarily dismiss. So pause with the little moments that feel good to you. Pause. Right now, I am pausing with my coffee on my deck. I am looking. I have a pond behind my house now, which I'm very excited about. It's a pond and it has a beautiful 3 little water fountains in it. And in the morning, it's the most beautiful sunrise, and the water and my coffee and the sunrise. And it's very simple and it's a small moment and I am savoring it. That's what I'm talking about. Maybe it is a beautiful sunset. Maybe it is a child's laughter. We know that when we savor the micro moments, that interrupts the hedonic adaptation and it strengthens those positive pathways. It doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but it is a big deal. In Mom Goes On, we celebrate at the beginning of every call. We find something to celebrate, something to feel good about. And it can't just be an intellectual exercise. Think of the word savor, right? You know that's not intellectual. Savor is something you do with your body. So we want to notice what it is, that little moment, and then we want to feel the goodness that we feel in our body and savor that little micro joy or that little micro moment. And the third thing I want to offer is that when we start to become aware of some of these thoughts that we're noticing, we also then have the ability to reframe them. We can reframe the things that we think. And we don't have to reframe them in full 180 fashion, right? We don't have to go from I hate my life to I love my life. But we can go from never to maybe to it could be to I wonder what's possible, right? We can make gradual reframing shifts. And science proves that this is helpful, that cultivating even small positive emotions expands our thinking, it expands our resourcefulness, right? It takes us toward what it is that we want to go. So that's another thing you can do. And the last thing I want to say about this is I want to encourage you to consider consistency, not intensity. Consistency, not intensity. Sometimes we think that we have to have these like big aha moments, or they have to do these big, dramatic, intense things. And I don't believe that's wonderful when it happens, but I don't believe that's where real change happens. Real change happens in consistency. Daily, repeatable, small movements matter so much more than big, once in a while epiphanies or, big once in a while efforts. So regular, intentional activities, that's what increases well-being. That's what even reduces symptoms of depression sometimes, and rather quickly. So think about not the big things, but how can I be consistent in the little things? So how can I increase my awareness? In Mom Goes On, we work a lot on this. How can I savor those little micro moments or micro joys, training my brain to focus more on what I want to see, building those positive neural pathways? How can I reframe what it is I'm telling myself? It doesn't have to be dramatic or drastic. It can be small. And then how can I be consistent, not intense, but consistent? And little by little, that's what we do. Truly is exactly what we do in Mom Goes On. And whether you join Mom Goes On or don't, Please don't ever do this. It's never about toxic positivity, ever. It is never about forcing gratitude. It is never about trying to find the silver lining or trying to make yourself believe that it was a part of God's plan when that's not what you believe. Okay? And if you believe it, that's great. But we don't ever want to force ourselves to try to believe things we don't believe. But evidence-based coaching that retrains your brain so your new normal doesn't suck and includes more peace and more joy and a higher level of happiness and a higher happiness set point, that is what I want for you. That is what I want for you. So if you want help moving out of that survival mode, actually thriving, moving towards a life that you truly want, one where happiness is not some sort of infrequent visitor, right? But it's actually part of your default. And I don't mean just happiness. I mean fulfillment. I mean a sense of aliveness, right? It's not just the fleeting emotion of happiness. It is a connection to self. It is a groundedness. It is a sense of purpose. It is a sense of alignment. That's what I'm talking about, right? If that's something that you want, go to coachingwithkrista.com. You can take the free grief stage assessment. It's quick, it's simple, could be the first step towards a future that is bigger and brighter than what your mind is telling you is possible right now. All right? I'll leave you with this. If you could set your happiness baseline anywhere you wanted, where would you put it? I promise you that your brain is more powerful than you think, and you can teach it where to settle. All right? That's what I have for you this week. Remember, I love you. You've got this. Take care, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. If you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and want to create a future you can truly get excited about even after the loss of your spouse, I invite you to join my Mom Goes On coaching program. It's small group coaching just for widowed moms like you, where I'll help you figure out what's holding you back and give you the tools and support you need so you can move forward with confidence. Please don't settle for a new normal that's less than what you deserve. Go to coachingwithkrista.com and click Work With Me for details and next steps. I can't wait to meet you.